Welcome back to New Rockstars. I'm Erik Voss, and this is an in-depth breakdown of House of the Dragon Season 2, Episode 2, where whether you spell Erik with an A or an E, you got too much honor for this cursed world, and you gotta get off the board. I'm going to analyze and break down this episode scene by scene for all the visual details, the deeper layers of meaning in the dialogue, secrets in the music, and just clues that you might have missed, and for all the speculation and spoilers for plot events from the Fire and Blood book that are coming beyond this episode. I will be saving all of that for the spoiler dungeon section at the end. All right, let's get started. The opening tapestry imagery is the same in episode 2 as it was in episode 1, and I broke down literally every frame of that in last week's video. Go check it out. But series creator Ryan Condal explained his decision to change this from season 1. The Blood River sequence from the first season had really come to an end now that the ancestry is sort of set, and now that war has erupted, they wanted to show the living history. And so they partnered with titles company Yuko, who designed this based on the Bayeux tapestry, depicting the Norman conquest of England. Like Aegon the Conqueror, William I crossed the English Channel and established the throne of a country that lasts to this day. This episode opens in the Red Keep hours after Prince Jaehaerys' murder. A maid brings out the bloodied sheets of the young prince. While episode 1 spared us the sight of any blood, this episode leads with it. And a general trigger warning for this breakdown: while I'm going to avoid showing any extreme violence, some of the details I talk about may lead you to dwell on the events of episode 1 more than you would want to. So household staff are dragged into the halls in these early morning hours, as Aemond is later told by Sylvie,
"I would remind you only that when princes lose their temper, it is often others who suffer."
Yes, the greatest pain inflicted by the Greens after this tragedy is against their own loyal servants. A King's Guard hands a blanket or a pillow to dogs to get the scent. This would have been from Jaehaerys' bed, and I think they must know that the boy's head was taken, so they're trying to get a scent of Jaehaerys' head itself. Sir Criston Cole sneaks through this chaos, and he's not wearing his helmet. He looks pretty flushed, as he was caught literally with his pants down. A boy who I assume is a chimney sweep is tripped, spilling his bucket of ashes, which match cut with Aegon smashing his father Viserys' model of Valyria, which was also destroyed in ash and in fire from erupting volcanoes. By destroying this model, Aegon is destroying his father's legacy of temperament and caution, which Otto will later warn him about. And Aegon is symbolically neglecting a duty that was carried on from Valyria and the dream of Daenys that saved this entire family lineage, a dream that later inspired his namesake Aegon the Conqueror in his dream, a dream that this Aegon does not know. Aegon screams, "I'll kill them! I'll kill them all!" Now he's sounding like his descendant, the Mad King. "Burn them all!" He also says, "They castrated me!" They castrated me. So remember last episode we talked about how Aegon jokingly considering the name of Aegon the Dragon would be ironic given the death of his only son and only heir, considering the Greens' claim to the throne is based on male primogeniture. Ryan Condal did confirm that they decided to exclude Aegon and Helena's second son from Fire and Blood, Maelor, from the show, at least for now. But sex and procreation are obviously still important to Aegon, as in this chamber he left up Viserys' horny orgy tapestries that we cannot show you. Blur them all! But we should note that Aegon may still have a male child. Season 1 episode 9 showed the platinum-haired Targaryen bastard in the fighting pits, but more on him in the spoiler dungeon. Aemond finds a hidden door in his wall, the wall that shows a mural of Balerion the Black Dread burning Harrenhal, and Blood and Cheese had used this secret passageway to enter the royal quarters section of the Red Keep. This would be one of many passageways built into the Red Keep by the architects who were killed by Maegor the Cruel to keep these secrets. Based on Aemond's reaction, I think he didn't even know this passageway was here the whole time he'd been in this room, and he's realizing now, well shit, they used my room to do this. I was the target. The coins he and Sir Criston had used to mark the map are gone. He finds one left over beneath the table and holds it directly in front of his one remaining eye. Coins are used to cover the eyes of the dead, as we saw with Joffrey's corpse in Game of Thrones season 4. So Aemond is dwelling now for the first time on his own mortality. Ramin Djawadi's chaotic violin sobers into a familiar piano melody. This track, Ramin Djawadi composing a House of the Dragon update to his Light of the Seven from Game of Thrones, this track is called Fate of the Kingdoms. We actually first heard it in season 1 episode 9 over the montage of the Greens seizing power following Viserys' death. That decision to usurp was truly what started this war. Alicent tells Otto,
"The child is dead. His pain is ended. But what they've done to my girl.
Yeah, she's about to say, to my girl. Alicent knows that it's Helaena, the sweet prophetic bug girl, hinted in the series to be on the spectrum, who's going to have to live with this. More on Helena's future in Fire and Blood in the spoiler dungeon, but last week I noted that this show seems to be picking a side in the blacks versus the greens, certainly drawing more sympathy towards Rhaenyra, but for the early scenes of this episode, focus is certainly given to the humanity and to the shame felt by Alicent.
What if the hand that's done it is not who must be blamed? The gods punish us. They punish me.
As a sept-going woman, Alicent blames herself and her sins with Sir Criston, but Otto is already moving on to political tactics, saying some good may yet come of this. In the small council chamber, Aegon rages at Sir Criston.
I'm bad! Instead of safeguarding the sanctity of my family.
Yeah, Sir Criston technically doesn't lie. He was abed, and Aegon doesn't even realize the irony of his words. The sanctity of my family. Alicent refuses to even look at Sir Criston when this is happening. And we learned in HBO's behind the scenes video that Otto's map of Westeros that stands vertically in the small council chamber is made out of separate pieces of ivory jigsawed together to represent the separate geographical regions of Westeros. This prop is awesome. After running out of people in the small council chamber to blame, Aegon turns to his mother.
You wished her life to be spared. If I may, Your Grace.
This is the moment Lord Larys Strong, despite entering this room moments earlier, and even hearing Aegon say, bitch queen of bastards, hinting that Jace and Joff are Strongs, and thus his biological nephews, only now does Larys choose to speak up to take Aegon's rage off of Alicent. Larys reports that they caught blood with Jaehaerys' head in a sack. Remember, blood would have been identified by that maid who spotted him and ran off in episode 1. Otto suggests that they tell the realm that Rhaenyra did it.
I will not be seen as weak.
You're already seen as weak, Aegon.
Notice how the camera suddenly shifts to a low angle of Rhys Ifans to make him look like a grandfather towering over his grandson. He suggests that after the hasty coronation interrupted by Rhaenys and Meleys crashing through the dragon pit, they really need a spectacle of their own in the form of a funeral procession with Jaehaerys' body with the women in tow. Helaena sniffs the cloth for Jaehaerys, and this is what she was sewing the golden dragon into in episode 1, meaning that she was inadvertently sewing his funeral garb. Or did she know? Either way, now she's just trying to cling to the scent of her son. She's leaning against the bedpost of Jaehaerys' bed, unable to turn back to look at Jaehaerys' bed. HBO's behind the scenes video showed how Helaena graffitied all over the walls drawings of her dreams.
Helaena sees and perceives the world in a different way and cultivates different things out of day-to-day interaction than perhaps you and I would. She has graffitied her walls with her dreams, and we think it really imbued the place with a great deal of character for her.
And this includes this image of a woman on fire. More on that in the spoiler dungeon. We also learned that the set decorators had Helaena keep all of these little figurines in cages to contain insects, and also incorporated butterflies and spiders in her embroideries. Alicent says,
We've been asked to ride on a wagon behind his body.
I don't want to.
Yes, the timing of that teardrop shaken out of her eyes by sudden disgust. Helaena picks out an elephant figurine for Jaehaerys. For Lucerys' funeral, remember Joffrey threw a figurine on the fire, and later Rhaenyra will pick up a dragon figurine played with by her and Daemon's new kids, Aegon. I know, so many Aegons. He'll become Aegon the Younger, and Viserys. This dragon toy likely was a hand-me-down from Luke. It's just tragic to think how all these toys are outliving the children they were made for. Now, this funeral procession is not included in Fire and Blood. This public display as a propaganda tool to villainize Rhaenyra reminds us of the Faith Militant in season 5 of Game of Thrones, forcing Cersei to do the walk of shame, shame, shame. It's always the women who have to be paraded to send these symbolic signals. Now, I am not going to show the close-up of Jaehaerys' body with his head sewed back on by the Silent Sisters. It's just not something we need to see again and to pause on. But just to verbally describe it, I did notice the head bobbing with the bumps of the carriage, and I just kind of hope that they used a VFX face map on a dummy, because the thought of the child actor having to sit in a makeup chair while these prosthetics were added and then told to lie nice and still while they bumped the cart to get the shot, I just don't like to think about it. But we do get a closer look at the green blanket Helaena wrapped him in, which Fia Saban discussed in the behind the scenes video includes an owl, which we see here. Last season we talked about the named hours of the night according to Westerosi custom, and the hour of the owl comes several hours into the night but still before dawn, which might have been right when Jaehaerys was murdered. The gold cloak Blood confesses Daemon's involvement and an unnamed rat catcher, and Larys brings in King Aegon to beat him with a mace. Aegon beating him to death does not happen in Fire and Blood, and Aegon's rage, when you think about it, actually causes more harm, since because they didn't take the time to bring in the 10 household rat catchers in front of Blood so that Blood could identify Cheese's face in the lineup, they had to end up executing all the rat catchers. In the Fire and Blood book, it gives additional context about Blood's interrogation, saying, quote, after 13 days of torment, Blood was at last allowed to die. Queen Alicent had commanded Larys Clubfoot to learn his true name so that she might bathe in the blood of his wife and children, but our sources do not say this occurred. The procession passes this woman. I think this might actually be the same person as Hugh's wife, named Kat, played by Alora Torchia, who we will see later this episode. Helena kind of disassociates as she sees the petals raining down around her, and I feel like she might be having another vision, perhaps of raining ash. She ends up panicking as the small folk mob her cart as it's stuck in the mud, and they are on her side in total grief here, but trailer footage includes shots that I was surprised not to see here, showing Alicent and Helena wearing black veils running through rioting streets, and I think Helena might actually be foreseeing a future moment when the people of King's Landing turn on them. We go from Sir Arik heaving the carriage out of the mud to this shot of Rhaenyra learning the news with Arik's twin brother Erik out of focus behind her. This link between the twins, Arik and Erik, will be the last strand of love shared across these warring factions. Jace proposes,
let me fly out on Vermax. Rhaenys is needed in the gullets and I can watch for movements from King's Landing.
No.
Rhaenyra knows that they're now caught in a cycle of a son for a son for a son for a son, and just does not want to keep trading by escalating with dragon deployment. The Black Council hints that they don't think the other lords of Westeros will believe that Rhaenyra had nothing to do with Jaehaerys' death, and even hint that they themselves don't think that she had nothing to do with it.
But it's a lie.
Just the little shift of the eyes back to Rhaenyra. Yes, Daemon does not want to look in the eyes of the lords standing around this table who know that he might have been involved with what happened. Rhaenyra says,
that I would inflict such a thing on Helena of all people.
Yes, one commonality shared between Rhaenyra and Alicent in this episode. While all the men of both councils view the act as a crime against the crown or against Aegon or against the prince, which that's fair, Alicent's first words were how this hurts Helena, and Rhaenyra also sees it primarily as a crime against the mother. There's an empathy among mothers in this episode that the men of the episode do not understand. Then there's this long pause.
The death of Prince Lucerys was a shock and an insult.
The eye contact is so perfect. Daemon cannot help but feel Rhaenys' eyes on him, and then his eyes slowly work their way over to meet hers. Remember, as cousins who are both passed over for the crown, riding the dragons of each other's parents, these two can see through each other better than most others can. Sir Alfred Broom suggests that losing Luke may have caused Rhaenyra to overreact, but Rhaenyra takes offense as they shout over the seated Rhaenys.
Mind yourself.
I love it, because she is speaking as Sir Alfred, but also she's telling Rhaenyra to keep her cool, but meanwhile notice she has never taken her eyes off Daemon, and ultimately is telling him he needs to mind himself. Rhaenyra finally looks over at Daemon, and then we jump cut to the two of them alone in Rhaenyra's chamber, where the climactic scene of this episode will later take place. Shifting these two characters to a private room, away from witnesses like Grand Maester Gerardus, who would enter any conversation into the historical record, now, in private, we always explore the juicier conversations that would not have been included in Fire and Blood. While Daemon denies telling Blood and Cheese to target a child specifically, and in episode 1, the scene cut away from Daemon before we saw exactly what he said, we do know that Blood said that he told them, quote, a son for a son, and that those are probably the exact vague words that Daemon gave. But Daemon here never admits to saying a son for a son, and chooses his words carefully with Rhaenyra now. And Rhaenyra just sees right through it. She finally realizes that she cannot trust Daemon, and that as a child she viewed that as a challenge, but now she has no time for games.
Or have you used me to grasp at your stolen inheritance?
Like Aegon, Daemon cannot communicate with words and just smashes goblets. Daemon nearly reaches up toward Rhaenyra's neck, but then retracts, and Rhaenyra flinches slightly, but she never breaks eye contact. It reminds us of the last time they had a private conversation in season 1, and he grabbed her neck to choke her, and in that moment she realized Viserys never told him the secret of Aegon's dream, and that Daemon was never seriously considered the heir. Rhaenyra recalls that before Daemon placed Viserys' crown on her head, he was leading a war council without her while she was in labor to what ended up being a stillborn. Daemon cannot even call the Iron Throne your throne to Rhaenyra. He still calls it his brother's throne, saying the quiet part out loud that Rhaenyra calls him out on. Honestly, the acting between Emma Darcy and Matt Smith represents these two actors' finest work, and I think this has to be their Emmy submissions. In a critical turning point in the conversation, Rhaenyra asks, do you accept me as your queen and ruler, or
do you cling even now to what you think you lost?
what I think I lost.
A few incredible things here. One, Denmon, by not answering Rhaenyra's question outright and just repeating her sentence back to her, semantically does answer the question, because he's literally saying the second one. I do still cling now to what I think I lost. Also, the composition of the shot. When Rhaenyra asks, do you accept me as your queen and ruler, she is in focus in the background, but when she says, or do you cling even now to what you think you lost, they do a focus shift in the middle of the shot to Denmon in the foreground to show how he puts his own pride over his respect for her. And then lastly, the plant decoration in the background of this room sticks out in radial strands from behind Daemon's head to make him look like he is trying to crown himself in his own mind's eye. Denmon says that Viserys chose Rhaenyra as heir just to put Denmon in his place.
I was not afraid of you, Denmon!
Rhaenyra again is hinting that Viserys was actually driven by a fear of Aegon's dream, the Song of Ice and Fire, and that he needed a successor who wouldn't tear the realm apart. And the fight ends in this quiet exchange.
You struck down a child.
It was a mistake.
Again, Denmon does not deny doing it. He just says, carefully, it was a mistake, which could mean the mistake was a miscommunication between what I actually ordered and what was carried out, or it could mean him admitting that the whole plot to send assassins into the Red Keep to begin with and to give them this wink-wink instruction of a son for a son, that entire move was a mistake. But he never specifies which was the mistake, and that is why she just ends by calling him pathetic. Now, during this fight, on the wall behind them are High Valyrian glyphs. Language expert David J. Peterson created all of these in addition to the spoken language for Game of Thrones and House of the Dragon, and he has posted specific phrases and their translations on his personal Tumblr blog. As of March 2023, he said that he had created 400 High Valyrian glyphs with a goal of eventually 700. He said each glyph is not a single letter, the way like Orbesh works, where there's like, this is A, this is B, but rather High Valyrian written words contain 3 parts: an alphabetic component, an iconic component, and a paradigmatic component, with all 3 elements used simultaneously. So think of it in terms of like, there's like a letter glyph, and then a glyph that puts it in one context, and then a glyph that puts it in a general paradigm context. And that's how they understand what these words are. So comparing these visible glyphs to the left of Daemon's head in this shot to David's various Tumblr posts, this little symbol that looks like a box with an X is associated with something being an active verb. The symbol that looks like 2 overlapping W's, I believe, is a glyph associated with blood, because we see it in the one for fire and blood. The 2 symbols above that correspond to like a third person agreement, and then to go. Actually, Gina, Ippolito, and I gave this our all, and this is as far as we got. You kind of have to just be a linguist to be able to understand this writing system. But on the strand of glyphs to the far left of the shot, there is this symbol, and I think that might correspond to the High Valyrian glyph of Dorana, the curved one of these, which David said means heir to the throne, female. And compared to the throne-shaped glyph on the right in this graphic that we're seeing here, the one where it's more box-shaped and 90 degrees, that one translates to heir to the throne, male. So think about it, the whole context of this fight between Denmon and Rhaenyra is whether Viserys' heir to the throne should have been male or female. Male would have been according to custom, which would have meant Denmon, but Viserys ended up breaking up custom to give it to the female, Rhaenyra, his one child at the time. And these are the glyphs that Rhaenyra chose to decorate her chamber with. And Denmon is seeing that glyph in his eye line, which feels like a personal insult to him. Okay, moving on. Rhaenyra tells Baela,
when morning comes, take Moondancer and keep a watch on King's Landing.
So Rhaenyra refused to let Jace take Vermax to watch King's Landing, but her niece Baela? Sure! Moondancer is Baela's pale green she-dragon, which in Fire and Blood is no more than the size of a warhorse at this point, and Baela really shouldn't be riding her great distances yet. But the show is really fast-tracking these characters' development. There's more to this that I'll talk about in the spoiler dungeon. Denmon takes Caraxes out from the Dragonmont. The growl of Caraxes was given a little flapping sound in his vocal cords to mimic the sound of breathing through a deviated septum. In Fire and Blood, Denmon was already somewhere else for all of this, but the show placed him here at Dragonstone so that Rhaenyra could completely break his ego, putting the show version of Denmon on a very interesting self-reflective journey this season. Check out the conversation that they had over on the break room after show for this episode of House of the Dragon, because they explored that with a lot of interesting points. Rhaenyra plays with her 2 youngest sons, fathered by Denmon, Aegon, aka Aegon the Younger, and Viserys. These boys play with a toy model of Dragonstone, and Rhaenyra hands the younger son, Viserys, the dragon figurine, The older son, Aegon the Younger, actually does have a living dragon right now named Stormcloud that he has not yet ridden, we don't think. But this younger son, Viserys, really just has a dragon egg from his crib that has not hatched yet. So I wonder if Rhaenyra may be giving him this little dragon figurine as like a good omen. Rhaenyra looks at the dust wafting in the sunlight, paralleling the moment Helaena did this with the petals. Really, we're seeing two mothers both grieving losing a son and still having to be queens and mothers to surviving kids. We've partnered with Geology to bring you the best skincare products we've ever used and to bring us the best skincare products we've ever used. It's a win-win for your skin and our skin. Geology's products use just a handful of powerful proven ingredients that have been trusted by dermatologists for decades, which is probably why Geology is a 32-time award-winning skin, hair, and body care company recognized in Men's Health, Oprah Daily, Hypebeast, Birdie, Esquire, and GQ. Geology can help you fight acne, reduce oilness, prevent wrinkles, combat dark or puffy under eyes, have smoother hydrated skin, and target signs of aging. And if you don't know where to start, Geology can create a simple and effective skincare or hair care routine for you. All you gotta do is take a quick 30-second quiz. And right now, Geology is giving our audience a $50 1-month skincare sample set for free. All you gotta do is pay for shipping. And if you decide to add anything on, you'll get 50% off that add-on. So what are you waiting for? Use code NewRockstars100 and grab 100% off your personalized skincare trial set, plus an additional 50% off on add-ons. Just click the link in the description or go to geolog.ie/rockstars100 to get started. Alicent, paranoid, watches her maid pour out the last pitcher of bathwater and then follows her out. After shooing away the bathmaids last episode out of fear that Larys may be installing spies, she's especially paranoid now after the blood and cheese incident. And then Sir Criston, after being unable to look at Jaehaerys' blood-stained mattress before, he now chooses to get upset about the mud stains on Sir Arik's white cloak.
You defy my authority, Sir Arik.
Now I know Arik and Eric are really just meant to be homophones. They're both pronounced Eric, but I just pronounce them differently just so you guys are clear. But as someone also named Eric with normal spelling, I swear to God, I can tell by the way people pronounce my name whether they think I spell it with a C or a K. It's just a thing, trust me. And I'm telling you, in this moment, Sir Criston deliberately pronounced it more like Eric than Arik just to piss off Arik. Like he's saying, you're the same as your brother who betrayed us. Sir Arik likely knows what Sir Criston was doing that night, but at first is careful not to make it a whole thing.
I have heard, my lord. I'll remedy the error.
It looks like he might have checked Criston's chest plate a little bit there. But Sir Criston was also standing so close to the bench that it was impossible for Sir Arik to pass him without bumping him. So really, I think he was baiting him. Sir Criston asks Arik where he was when Jaehaerys was murdered, but I'm pretty sure Criston knows that Sir Arik was doing his duty. He was guarding the king in the throne room, but really he is just tempting Arik into losing his temper and to come at him so that he can escalate stuff now crazily so that he can use that as a predicate to bring up this new mission. He's really catching Arik in a trap here because Sir Criston sucks. And I like how the other knights leave the area, and when an armorer knocks a crossbow, Criston pulls Arik out of earshot. It's another example in this episode of a conversation whose exact transcript is disputed in Fire and Blood, taking place in this show in a private setting with no witnesses to verify it. Sir Criston says,
You will go to Dragonstone and strike down Rhaenyra in her own halls.
Now, in Fire and Blood, Sir Criston tells Arik to pose as his twin brother, but it's uncertain if the order was to kill Rhaenyra or to kill one of her kids. Meanwhile, Baela asks what Jace remembers of her uncle, referring to Leonor Velaryon.
He taught us to catch fish and sing sailors' shanties. He had a weakness for cake.
A sweet tooth for the Night of Kisses, maybe. Baela asks Jace about Harwin Strong, and there's this sweetness here, indicating that both Baela and Jace might be cleared on the same page, that Harwin is his biological father, making Jace a bastard, and they're both just okay with that. But that would also mean that Jace knows that if this war ever ends with Rhaenyra as the victor, his half-brother Aegon will probably be named heir over him. And I think we can assume from that Jace was probably not told about Aegon's dream, at least not yet. We learn that Aemond wasn't killed because he apparently had spent the night in the Street of Silk with Sylvie, the brothel madam played by Michelle Bonnard, whom Sir Criston and Aemond spoke to back in season 1 episode 9 when they were looking for Aegon.
How you've grown.
Aemond says,
I do regret that business with Luke. I lost my temper that day. I am sorry for it.
We knew from Aemond saying, Vhagar, no! That Aemond on the series did not intend on it going that way. But when you go back to watch the scenes at Storm's End, remember Luke didn't really do anything to trigger Aemond's temper. Like, Aemond started that night with fire in his blood. I think Aemond only feels regret now because he was very nearly killed. He's dwelling on his own mortality. Also, we should note that of all the sex workers he could have picked in this brothel, Aemond chooses the older madam, with her hair the same color as his mother's, and he boyishly rests his head on her lap. This is a conversation that he wishes he he could have with Alicent, but you know, her lap is occupied. We check in with Hugh, the Ironsmith, who requested to be paid up front by King Aegon in episode 1, and we learn that he has a family, his wife, Kat, and a sick child. The blockade in the Gullet is causing food to become scarce and prices to inflate in King's Landing. Now, Hugh having a family is not mentioned in Fire and Blood, but more about what the show might be doing with the character in the spoiler dungeon. For now, I'll just say his big old pinch of salt that he adds to his soup tells us this guy likes a bit of seasoning in his life. On Driftmark, Alan of Hull reunites with his brother Adam of Hull, played by Clinton Liberty. Corlys's ship, the Sea Snake, is being reconstructed in a drained bay that will refill with water when the dam is opened and the tide rolls in. You can actually see the water line on the seawall there. Despite the strong likelihood that Alan and Adam are Valyrian bastards, Adam does not have Corlys's silver Valyrian hair, which I find interesting. Still, Adam says,
"But brother, he owes you. He owes us."
Yeah, I think the implication is that Corlys is their father and they're bastards of him. The scene ends with them headed off to eat some stew, and I just think it's worth noting that the small folk of this, both them and Hugh, are slurping stew this week. Rhaenyra goes through the Dragonstone archives and finds this book entry with one page about Aegon the Conqueror and his sister wives Visenya and Rhaenys. The bottom paragraph reads this: Visenya was as fierce and noble as a warrior, and Aegon himself able to wield power from sky and land in equal measures. At the hand of her Valyrian longsword, Dark Sister, many an enemy could be slain. She was indeed as comfortable in... and then it trails off. This passage is talking about Visenya, who rode Vhagar, so I think she's looking up information and history about the dragon Vhagar and really how dangerous it is. But also in reading Visenya's story, Rhaenyra is finding strength in history. The fact that Aegon's sister wives were as fierce as he was, and so Rhaenyra doesn't need to feel intimidated by Daemon. Rhaenyra turns the page, and the text on the right reads, despite the great success of the first conquest, Aegon had yet to succeed with his quest to conquer all 7 kingdoms. Under the leadership of the formidable Princess Miriam Martell, Dorne had fiercely resisted, proud and defiant of their land. Aegon would not be deterred so easily, thus came the First Dornish War. King Aegon had already proved himself to be a highly skilled dragon rider, having first tasted the metal of warfare in a great century of blood, a time of much chaos and destruction, known to many as the Bleeding Years. In the impending battles to come, he would wrestle towards victory, flying above the ranks of his foes upon Balerion. So let's talk about the First Dornish War. In that war, Miriam Martell, the Yellow Toad of Dorne, never yielded to Aegon and told her lords to abandon their castles, but really just to give the Targaryen lords false confidence so that the Dornish could sneak back in and retake their castles. The Century of Blood refers to a period after the Doom of Valyria in which Essos was plunged into chaos as the political status quo was upended by the shattering of Valyria, and the surviving dragon lords fought each other, and then this ended with the rise of the 9 free cities as well as the rise of the Dothraki in Essos. Rhaenyra remembers Mysaria as the woman Daemon claimed he had impregnated and wanted to take as a wife when he briefly took Dragonstone back in season 1 episode 2 and took the egg laid by Dreamfire, the egg that Rhaenyra had put in the crib of her unborn baby brother Baelon. Mysaria explains how she worked her way up, stealing, selling her body, learning secrets, becoming the White Worm, and she says whether it's Daemon or Otto Hightower, they'll never take her seriously, and this just rings true for Rhaenyra. She probably feels the same way, and she asks,
"How did you get that scar?"
This scar was actually on Myzaria's neck throughout season 1, and the thinking is that she might have once been a slave and might have worn a slave collar around her neck that left this scarring. Adam of Hull digs for clams and crabs. The dragon Sea Smoke flies overhead. This was the dragon of Laenor Velaryon who died in Fire and Blood but was left alive in this show, yet his dragon remains riderless.
There's this little moment with a man in King's Landing who steals food and pockets it. This is actor Tom Bennett, who we know will be playing a character named Ulf the White this season. He seems particularly judgy of Aegon's executions, but more on him in the spoiler dungeon.
Aegon ordered all of the Red Keep rat catchers to be hung in public. We're not going to show you their hanging bodies because YouTube, but we counted 10 of them. In Fire and Blood, Aegon does indeed do this, and the Red Keep replaces the rat catchers with a whole bunch of cats. While the other rat catchers are mourned by their family members, Cheese just has this poor mistreated dog. God, I hope Hugh Hammer adopts this dog. I'll watch 6 seasons of Hugh and Cheese Dog. The last pieces of Viserys' smashed model of Valyria are carted out of Aegon II's chamber, the last fragments of his father's pragmatic legacy brushed away. The only visual remembrance Aegon has of his father are Viserys' horny dragon bestiality porn artwork that we can't show you because of YouTube. Otto rages.
He's murdered innocent men!
And one guilty one.
In criminal law, there is a concept called Blackstone's ratio, coming from English jurist William Blackstone in the 1760s. It is better that 10 guilty persons escape than 1 innocent suffer. And since in America, we have like English common law as the basis of our judicial system, and we have this concept of innocent before proven guilty, with the burden being on the state to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that someone is guilty. But truly, Aegon's rationale represents a pre-Enlightenment medieval thinking. Otto closes the doors, so it's just him and Aegon and Sir Criston, and I'm sorry to keep harping different on this, but it's yet another example of the most tense moments on the show being something that would be kept unheard by the historical transcript of any other witnesses. Otto says Aegon squandered the PR advantage they gained from the funeral procession, which particularly enrages Otto because it meant that he humiliated his daughter and his granddaughter for nothing. Aegon says,
I wish to spill blood, not ink.
This is a version of a line from Fire and Blood, in which a little later than this, into the Civil War, Aegon finds Otto writing a letter and spills the inkpot into Otto's lap, declaring, "Thrones are won with swords, not quills. Spill blood, not ink." There is some great blocking in the scene where Rhys Ifans paces as he loses himself while Sir Criston stays motionless to show unwavering resolve. And Tom Glenn Carnia's Aegon countercrosses closer to Sir Criston to be more in his orbit, kicking a piece of Viserys' Valyria model.
You display impetuousness and diminish us in the eyes of our enemy, ill-considered, trifling.
And hearing Aegon swipe that piece on the floor makes Otto trail off his sentence and realize how good he actually had it with Viserys. But Aegon counters that Viserys is dead.
He is. And we are the poorer for it.
And again, amazing shot composition with the three men forming a perfect line, Aegon in a pickle between the hand of his past and the hand of his future. But then Otto goes a step too far, out of personal ego and spite, typical of the Greens.
He was right about you.
He made me king.
Is that what you think?
So Rhys Ifans is eating it up in this scene, and as TV viewers, we like to see him score this shattering jab. It's kind of like in The Social Network when Andrew Garfield tells Timberlake,
I like sitting next to you, Sean. Makes me look so tough.
In season 1, throughout Viserys' later years, he maintained that Rhaenyra should remain his heir, even after Aegon was born. And it wasn't until Viserys' deathbed, when he was rambling about Aegon's dream, that Alicent misheard the word Aegon and thought it referred to her son. And then Otto used that as an opportunity to put Aegon on the throne, while Aegon had been hiding drunk in King's Landing. So in this moment, Otto is admitting to Aegon that Viserys saying Aegon on his deathbed was just complete bullshit, and that they used that to their advantage, and really was Otto who put him on the throne. But like Aemond going too far against Luke and Aegon going too far with the Ratcatchers, this was an unnecessary late hit by Otto that really just forced his grandson to dismiss him, and so he tells him to remove the badge.
You wouldn't dare.
I have dared, and I find it stimulating.
Last episode, Aegon struggled to decide on a moniker for himself. Should it be Aegon the Magnanimous, Aegon the Generous, Aegon the Dragon Cock? Now he seems to be activated by the identity of Aegon the Daring, but in Fire and Blood, it's really his younger brother Daron who goes by the name Daron the Daring. Aegon says to give his hand badge to Sir Criston.
My new hand will be a steel fist.
Ooh, what the young pup king fails to remember is the old adage, the king shits and the hand wipes. So do you want a steel fist wiping ya, Aegon? Otto tosses the badge and it clangs at Sir Criston's feet, recalling Sir Barristan Selmy's forced retirement in Game of Thrones Season 1.
Here, boy. Melt it down and add it to the others.
On Otto's way out, Aegon says,
You are dismissed.
It's the kind of power move that we saw in another Aaron Sorkin script, A Few Good Men.
Read the letters. I'll expect a report when you return from Cuba.
Sure.
You're dismissed.
I always forget that part.
Freed by Rhaenyra, Mysaria passes the arrivals to Dragonstone, including a white-cloaked Sir Erik, which causes her to do a double take because she just saw Sir Erik back in the castle. So this sets up why we had this interaction back in episode 1.
When last we met, there were two of you.
So Mysaria stops her guard to alert the castle, but we don't see that chain of communication from here on out in the episode, so we are just left in a state of tension, wondering if the word can get to the right people at the right time. Initially, it seems like they were going to separate Erik from Arik, Arik being the assassin, Erik being the impression, by having one of them have a helmet on. But immediately, when Sir Erik passes Sir Arik takes his helmet off because he realizes, oh, I need to have my helmet off to look like my brother. So even now, from this point, the viewer won't know for certain who's who for much of these final 10 minutes. Like, there is this shot where who we assume is Sir Arik, the assassin, passes the painted table so that we think, oh, it's like when Blood and Cheese walk through the throne room unnoticed in episode 1. But then we cut to shots of Rhaenyra stepping away from her hair being braided, and we're like, stay up, stay up, stay up, don't go to bed, don't put your guard down. And actually Rhaenyra might be looking out her window, seeing Mysaria and her guards running up toward the castle and wondering, what's that all about? But then our next shot is of Sir Arik walking? But no, that was Sir Erik, the protector, walking past the painted table, while Sir Arik, the assassin, had been hiding behind a corner during all that time, waiting. So even the editing is obscuring who is who, and it's part of what makes this sequence so tense. Arik locks Rhaenyra's back door, cutting off her escape, and then goes around to relieve Sir Lord Laurent Marbrand at Rhaenyra's main door. And then Rhaenyra's maid says that she'll bring a draft from the maester. So like everyone drinking wine in the Red Keep in episode 1, we're like, oh great, now the target's gonna be drunk. But Sir Arik bursts into the room.
Believe me, I had no choice.
I don't understand.
So I have to assume that when Sir Erik passed Arik before, Erik had been headed outside, and that is where he ran into the guards that Mysaria sent up, because Erik doesn't need any time to assess what's going on in the room here. He knows that his brother is in there. So watching this amazing scene for the first time, the duel is just so gripping because we quickly lose a sense of who is who. So let's take this play by play. So Arik lunges at Rhaenyra and Erik rushes over to block. And then from here, the music stops and then everyone just looks at each other in a state of panic. Arik starts hacking away at his brother Erik, and then their swords clash as Rhaenyra tells her maid to go find Sir Laurent. Rhaenyra crawls out of her bed and then hugs the curtains, and then Erik, the protector, has to turn back to see her to make sure that he's staying between her and his brother. Arik strikes at Erik and then cuts his leg, knocking down the protector and exposing Rhaenyra. She runs for it, but Arik lunges at her. Erik scrambles to his feet and kicks his brother into the flower pot, and Rhaenyra is now so close to all these swinging swords, she can't even get to her feet without risking getting cut. It's all so intimate and in close quarters. Now the two brothers are back at their feet, and I believe Sir Erik, the protector, is wounded in the leg, while Sir Arik, the assassin, is bleeding from the mouth. Sir Laurent finally arrives, but he's not wearing armor, and Rhaenyra tries to escape out the back door, but it's locked. Sir Laurent asks,
Which is Erik?
It's an insane thing to ask, because the way these characters' names have always been pronounced on this show, they're both Erik. Rhaenyra and we have no idea the answer to this question, but Erik, the protector, chokes Arik, the assassin, who says,
We were born together. You parted us! But I still love you, brother.
So Erik, the protector, blames Arik, the assassin, for parting them. As in, this decision to come to assassinate Rhaenyra was what parted us. Before this, we were still brothers. It wasn't Erik leaving King's Landing to join the Blacks that did that. It was when they decided to hurt each other. Erik plunges his sword into his brother's chest. But now the room is crowded. Sir Laurent is there.
Your Grace.
Erik.
Forgive me.
Oh my god. So while the winning twin addresses Rhaenyra as Your Grace, Rhaenyra from that assumes that it's her protector, Sir Erik. Now in Fire and Blood, Sir Arik gets this order from Sir Criston and is disgusted by it. He prays for forgiveness. And when he enters Dragonstone, it's not Mysaria who spots him, it's his own twin brother, and they start fighting from there. The brothers do fight and kill each other, but according to Mushroom, the fight is quick and angry, but according to the singers, the fight lasted for an hour, and the brothers died in each other's arms, declaring their love for each other. So I love that it's still quick and angry, but it feels like a long time, and the brothers do die hugging each other and loving each other. In this chess match between the Greens and the Blacks, they have basically traded knights and cleared two of the best pieces off the board. But something greater was lost here, the fraternal bond between kin who actually love each other, who place above all else duty, followed by family, two values that govern neither the Greens nor the Blacks right now. Otto wants to return to Old Town.
And you have a son there. Daron may yet help us in weeks to come.
Finally, we get a mention of Alicent's fourth child, Darren, who so far has been a no-show on the series. He has bonded with a she-dragon named Tessarion and has not yet been cast for the show, so I don't know if we'll see him this season. Alicent tells her father to go to Highgarden and to the Tyrells instead to secure the Reach. Alicent finds Aegon sobbing, but does not comfort her son. Compare that to Rhaenyra when her son Jace was crying in episode 1. The episode ends in this private moment with Alicent and Sir Criston as she slaps and shoves him, but then cannot help finish what they started at the end of last episode. I feel like Otto Hightower here, despite all the goodwill this episode gained by making me feel sympathy for the Greens, and for Alicent in particular. We're just back to this show, forcing the character back into a selfish impulse. How could an episode that opened this way end by making Rhaenyra look like a helpless victim and Alicent look like Lady Macbeth? Okay, closing out on the spoiler dungeon.
Okay, we're gonna take these book spoiler by book spoiler, starting with Tom Bennett in this episode as a character named Ulf the White, who, along with Hugh Hammer and Adam of Hull, will become dragon seed for the Blacks, Valyrian-blooded individuals recruited to ride dragons by Daemon. Ulf will bond with and ride Silverwing, the dragon of Queen Alysanne that Cragen Stark referenced was afraid to cross north of the Wall, along with Vermithor, who will end up pairing with Hugh Hammer. Like Hugh, Ulf seems to have some silver streaks in his hair to hint at his Valyrian ancestry, and like both Hugh and Adam, he seems particularly driven by food this episode, and the blockade of King's Landing and the extremity of the Greens' actions will factor into their coming defections.
In Fire and Blood, Jaehaerys' death causes Helaena to retreat from public view and to go mad, and is especially sent overboard when her surviving son Maelor dies at the Battle of Bitterbridge, leading to Helaena throwing herself from a window. But rumors went around that Rhaenyra hired Goldcloaks to murder her. I wonder if Helena's graffiti drawing of a woman on fire could be this show's plan for Helaena. Helaena might go into the dragon pit and order Dreamfire to torch her the way that Lyanna died. Okay, the boy in the fighting pits in season 1 episode 9, who we think might be Aegon's bastard, was confirmed by the show last season to be Gaemon Palehair. In Fire and Blood, Gaemon Palehair is just a kid from the Street of Silk whose mother Essie claimed was Aegon II's son, and this little kid later leads a really fun populist uprising, but it ends with his mother renouncing his paternity from Aegon II, maybe forced to renounce it, we don't know, and Gaemon ends up becoming Aegon II's ward of the crown, and then later the food tester for Aegon the Younger, Aegon III, and then the poor kid later dies of poisoning. Okay, next, that mention of Jace and the Gullet and Rhaenyra's refusal to let him take out Vermax, I think was actually setting up her fear of Jace's coming involvement at the Battle of the Gullet, which I think will be the season 2 finale battle. Okay, this line from Rhaenyra:
when morning comes, take Moondancer and keep a watch on King's Landing.
Morning is actually the name of Baela's sister's future dragon, Rhaenyra's dragon, a tiny pink she-dragon named Morning that hatches from one of the 3 eggs that Rhaenyra will take with her to the Vale. So I think they just used the word morning there, maybe as a little wink to that. Okay, next, when Rhaenyra sends Baela and Moondancer to King's Landing, I think that might be setting up Baela to ride Moondancer in the Battle of Rook's Rest, because this series is going to start killing off twins with similar names to make it easier to follow in season 3, and I think Moondancer and Baela are going to die in the middle of the season, and that's going to send Jace off the edge and lead him to the Battle of the Gullet. Okay, next, Rhaenyra's sons will become Aegon III, Aegon the Younger, and Viserys II, both of whom will be kings in the future. Viserys will serve as Aegon III's hand, and then hand to Aegon's 2 children, the second of whom is Baelor the Blessed, and then with no male children in the line of succession, Viserys II will become king because no one will want a repeat of Rhaenyra in the Dance of the Dragons at that point. So Rhaenyra giving young Viserys a dragon figurine is ironic because his dragon egg will never hatch. Okay, next, how will Hugh Hammer get to Dragonstone to become a dragon seed for the Blacks? I think the blockade is going to worsen his sick kid's condition, and when this kid and maybe also his wife die in like a looting riot in King's Landing, Hugh is going to blame the Greens and blame Aegon and then pledge to become a smith for the Blacks. I think they just wanted to give all the dragon seed more of a backstory because they're going to end up being distinct heroes by the end of the season. I mean, think about it. People who are bastards from noble beginnings who end up getting to ride dragons, that's awesome. Okay, the mention of Marya Martell of Dorne abandoning their castles to trick the Targaryens, I think might be a clue setting up how Daemon is going to end up tricking Aemond with Harrenhal, leaving Harrenhal empty as like a fake out while they actually go down to take King's Landing. And then finally, a big spoiler here for the whole series, Rhaenyra's tension with Sir Alfred Broom on Dragonstone. Let's keep an eye on that because ultimately it's going to be Sir Alfred who betrays Rhaenyra when she flees King's Landing after the storming of the Dragon Pit and returns to Dragonstone, and I won't even say here what happens after that. Okay, comment down below with your thoughts, and a big thanks to Brandon, Barrick, and Gina Ippolito for all their research help. You can follow me at Erik Voss, subscribe to all 3 channels of the new Rockstars Network for breakdowns and news coverage of everything you love. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.